For decades, his voice has symbolized steadiness. It has carried authority without effort, wisdom without arrogance, and calm without fragility. People have trusted it in narration, in interviews, in moments of cultural weight. So when that same voice sounded strained, when his posture stiffened and his expression betrayed tension, it was immediately clear that this was not a performance. There was no character being portrayed, no script being followed. What unfolded was not technique, but truth. It was the visible collision between private grief and public reality. When he stepped forward unexpectedly, what emerged was not carefully crafted sentiment. It was the unmistakable impact of something devastating finally breaking into daylight. For 48 hours, the public conversation about Rob Reiner's reported passing had been wrapped in restraint. Statements were issued in softened tones. Headlines leaned on delicate phrasing meant to cushion the shock. Words were selected not to inflame, but to soothe. But Morgan Freeman refused to participate in that choreography. Instead of echoing polite condolences, he cut through the protective packaging and directed attention to what had been quietly ignored for years. He did not come forward to repeat familiar lines of sympathy. He spoke because, in his view, the silence surrounding Nick Reiner had never been incidental. It had been deliberate. And ignoring warning signs, he argued, is not the same as staying neutral. It is choosing a side. That belief sharpened every sentence he delivered. The relationship between Freeman and Rob Reiner was not casual or superficial. Their connection was forged during the making of The Bucket List, a film that itself wrestled with mortality, unfinished business, and the weight of reflection. Long nights on set often turned into intimate conversations. Freeman shared that Rob spoke openly about his children in those quiet hours. Yet when Nick's name surfaced, something shifted. The mood changed. The energy tightened. The room seemed to cool in an almost physical way. Freeman once said, "I sat in that chair, and I know exactly what's going through your mind." That statement carried extra weight because observation has defined his career. He studies nuance. He notices what people don't say as much as what they do. During his recent remarks, Freeman revealed details that altered how many now view the Reiner household. At one point, he stopped mid-thought, stepped back from the microphone, and appeared shaken before quietly stating, "We all saw the cracks, and we all handed Rob the glue to fix them, knowing it wouldn't hold." The words hung in the air. They were not dramatic for effect. They were heavy with accountability. While reporters focused on investigative developments and the scene outside the Brentwood property, Freeman spoke about a longer arc. He described patterns that stretched back years. He talked about pressure that accumulated slowly, about enabling that felt compassionate in the moment, but corrosive over time. This was not, in his telling, a sudden explosion. It was a gradual unraveling that too many people chose not to confront. He also recounted a private dinner from 3 years earlier, attended by select industry figures. Nick arrived without warning. According to Freeman, the room stiffened instantly. Conversation stalled. The tension was thick, almost suffocating. Rob Reiner, normally the most commanding presence in any gathering, seemed to fold inward. His shoulders rounded. His voice softened. In that instant, Freeman realized something unsettling. A man celebrated for power and influence felt deeply uneasy within his own family dynamic. Outside the Los Angeles Superior Courtroom, developments in the Nick Reiner case have intensified public scrutiny. Reiner, 32, appeared for a second court hearing related to the double murder of his parents, Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner. He entered wearing a brown prison uniform. Observers described him as hunched, his hair freshly shorn. At moments he glanced across the courtroom, occasionally allowing a faint, tight expression to cross his face. Yet for most of the proceedings, he stared forward without visible reaction. Freeman's comments at this stage stopped sounding like analysis and began to resemble a warning delivered too late. He disclosed that just weeks before everything collapsed, Rob reached out to him. This was not a casual exchange between colleagues. It was a late-night conversation weighted with anxiety. Rob asked questions indirectly, circling topics without fully naming them. He wondered about boundaries. He asked when love might cross into danger. He struggled with the idea of closing the door on his own child. These were not abstract musings. They were signals of desperation. Here was a man with influence, wealth, and access to every conceivable resource, quietly asking whether it was acceptable to protect himself from his son. Freeman admitted that he advised Rob to focus first on Michelle's safety and to consider creating distance from chaos. But even as he offered that guidance, he sensed resistance rooted not in denial but in character. Rob's defining trait was compassion. The same empathy that allowed him to create Stand By Me was the empathy that made him vulnerable. Freeman emphasized that Nick understood this intimately. He knew which emotional chords to strike. He knew when vulnerability would draw his mother's comfort, and when pressure would prompt his father to respond with support instead of boundaries. Freeman rejected the idea that this tragedy stemmed from sudden confusion or an unpredictable mental break. In his view, this was not randomness. It was intention. He used the word calculation carefully. Nick knew the home's rhythms. He understood access points and timing. He knew the emotional landscape as thoroughly as the physical one. Freeman suggested that kindness had been turned into leverage. Rob and Michelle were not negligent. They were loving parents caught in a painful contradiction. They believed compassion could still stabilize something that had long been unstable. When discussing the final night, Freeman's account diverged from sterile official reports. While formal summaries relied on technical descriptions, he focused on the human implications. One detail struck him immediately. There were no obvious signs that Rob attempted to defend himself. To Freeman, that absence meant something profound. A lack of struggle does not equal surrender. It suggests trust. Even in the last moments, Rob did not fully believe his son would cross an irreversible line. Freeman's voice wavered as he described the image that haunted him. Rob was not facing a stranger. He was not bracing against unknown violence. He was standing before his child, still trying to reach him, still trying to de-escalate, still holding onto hope. He did not die resisting an enemy. He died extending love. That picture overrides speculation and noise. It leaves only the stark reality of a father unable to accept the worst until it became unavoidable. In moments like this, Hollywood often retreats into controlled messaging. Details become vague. Stories are polished. Difficult conversations are postponed indefinitely. Freeman refused that route. Silence, he argued, no longer served protection. It preserved patterns that should have been confronted long ago. Honoring Rob, in his view, required clarity, not gloss. Beneath Freeman's steady tone was unmistakable frustration. He criticized acquaintances who continued providing financial support to Nick after Rob attempted to establish boundaries. He called out industry figures who reopened professional doors that should have remained closed. Second chances were extended not because they were earned, but because of lineage. We created something dangerous by feeding it, he said, adding that Rob and Michelle were ultimately left to absorb the consequences alone. That statement was not casual commentary. It was an indictment of a broader system. Freeman acknowledged Nick's earlier struggles with substance abuse between the ages of 15 and 19, including time in and out of rehabilitation programs. But he insisted that past hardship does not erase awareness. He described Nick as conscious of his actions, deliberate in his behavior, and capable of manipulation. Those words carry weight because they come from someone whose credibility spans decades. The silence from others close to Rob, including Billy Crystal and Tom Cruise, has not gone unnoticed. Whether out of grief or caution, their absence from public commentary underscores the gravity of Freeman's decision to speak so directly. Freeman also addressed rumors suggesting hidden darkness within the Reiner home. He rejected that narrative outright. He portrayed the household as stable and loving. Michelle, he said, was the steady center, the bridge holding everything together with patience and hope. In his framing, disruption entered from outside, not from within. He mentioned that Rob had been quietly working on a deeply personal script. Though specifics were withheld, Freeman implied that Nick may have encountered it. If Rob was drawing from lived experience, exploring family conflict through art, and Nick saw himself depicted not heroically but cautionarily, the impact could have been profound. Sometimes the mirror of art reflects more sharply than confrontation ever could. Freeman revealed that he had spoken with Michelle 2 days before the tragedy. She did not sound alarmed, but she did sound exhausted. Nick planned to visit for the holidays. Another attempt at reconciliation. Freeman admitted he felt uneasy and advised meeting in a public setting instead of at home. He considered that home sacred. Now he carries the weight of knowing that advice went unheeded, not from neglect, but from hope. Grief and guilt now intertwine in his demeanor. He wonders whether stronger intervention might have changed the outcome. Rob Reiner was not just a filmmaker. He was an architect of emotional landmarks. When Harry Met Sally and The Princess Bride are woven into the cultural memory of millions. Reconciling that legacy with such an ending creates painful dissonance. Freeman stripped away illusions about status as protection. Wealth does not insulate against instability. Fame does not neutralize harm. Entitlement, he said, can corrode character. He recalled an incident in which Nick lashed out at a production assistant over something minor. Rob stepped in not to defend his son, but to apologize for him. The image of a respected director apologizing for his adult child lingered as a symbol of imbalance. Over time, small fractures widened. Disrespect evolved into financial strain. Financial strain deepened into emotional exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion escalated into destruction. Each overlooked moment compounded the next. Freeman framed the tragedy as a warning about the thin line between love and danger. Rob's enduring belief that his son would return to the person he once was blurred that boundary. Hope can distort perception. His testimony also complicates legal strategy. By asserting awareness and intent, Freeman challenges any narrative that reduces events to misunderstanding alone. He urged the public to look beyond headlines and examine patterns. He acknowledged a broader truth. Powerful families often experience alternative outcomes, insulated environments, and softened consequences. He hinted at institutional complicity, suggesting that instability had been observed but not addressed in order to preserve reputation. When asked how Rob should be remembered, Freeman did not recite filmography. He said he wanted him remembered as a man who loved without limits. Then he added that Nick should be remembered as someone who never learned how to love. The contrast was stark and final. As shock fades, accountability comes into focus. Freeman's voice has cracked the wall of silence. Stories may resurface. Context may shift. The public image of the Reiner family will likely be re-examined piece by piece. Rob understood narrative structure. He knew unresolved tension escalates. Freeman suggested he may have sensed the trajectory, yet believed it could still change. That belief proved tragic. When Freeman left the cameras, he did so alone. He looked older, not because of time, but because of grief. The legal process will advance in January. Court dates will be set. Arguments will unfold. But in the court of public opinion, a line has already been drawn. Nick Reiner is not being judged solely for actions, but for the destruction left behind. A fractured family, a broken trust, the most fundamental bond between parent and child. Because a voice long trusted spoke with clarity. This story will not easily be reshaped. This is no longer simply a tale about celebrity. It is about boundaries dismissed, warning signs overlooked, and love extended beyond its breaking point. Freeman did not speak to provoke. He spoke to preserve truth. We will continue examining every development as it unfolds. If you want to remain informed about this case and other significant stories, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And before you leave, take a look at the next video on your screen. More details are emerging, and this story is far from over.